It's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sports, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, the highly respected Conservative MP and chairman of the influential Eurosceptic group of backbenchers, the ERG. Now, Mark has been the Member of Parliament for Rayleigh and Wickford, previously Rayleigh, since 2001. In 1983, whilst at university, he joined the Territorial Army and was commissioned in December 1985 and served with the Royal Anglican Regiment until September 1989, reaching the rank of lieutenant. In government, Mark has served in a wide range of ministerial roles, and in spite of his full schedule, he found time to pen his love letter to Brexit, something for which he has long campaigned. Spartan Victory, the inside story of the battle for Brexit, is out now. Mark Francois, welcome to GB News.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on the programme. Let's get down to brass tacks. Is the Rishi deal a goer?
Well, when we know what it is, and we've had a chance to read it and study it, then we can give you an opinion. But the problem is, we don't know what it is. As I understand it, unless they've been briefed in the last hour or so, I'm not sure even the Cabinet have been briefed on it yet. I don't think the DUP have been given all the details. We certainly don't. So it's difficult to give you a definitive opinion until we actually know what's in it. There's been a tremendous amount of cloak and dagger about this, as you and your colleagues in the media are well aware, and you kind of think if the government thought this was such a cracking deal, we would have been told the details by now. So I can give you a better opinion when we've had a chance to read it.
If the DUP reject it, well, then it's a non-starter, isn't it? Because you won't have power sharing in Stormont, and therefore it renders the whole project a waste of time.
Correct. And in fact, I think the government understand that. I mean, the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, said on Friday, and I just want to get the quote right, the government will not sign off on a Northern Ireland Protocol deal without DUP backing. I mean, that couldn't be clearer. That's very clear English. So the Foreign Secretary, one of the holders of the four great offices of state in the government, has basically already told us that if the DUP don't agree, the government won't sign off on the deal. So, and it's always been the case, right from the get-go on this, that if the DUP don't agree and don't go back into Stormont, the whole thing is not going to work.
What about the ERG? What happens if the ERG aren't happy? What are the political implications for the Prime Minister if he goes over your heads with the support of Labour votes?
I don't think any Conservative Prime Minister would want to win a potentially controversial vote in the House of Commons on the back of Labour votes. Because if you think it through, what would then happen? You know, the following Wednesday, Sir Keir Starmer stands at the dispatch box in the Commons and says, is there anything else I can do for you? Because I'm clearly running the place now. I mean, I don't think any PM would want to end up in that situation. So if they want our support and that of the DUP and other MPs, show us the legal text. Because if you're amending protocols or treaties, that requires a formal legal text to do it. The rumour is we're going to get a white paper tomorrow. Well, that's well and good. We can have a look at that. But what you really need is the legal text so that you can understand the legal implications of what is proposed. And when we get that, we have a team of lawyers. We call them the Star Chamber under Sir William Cash. We'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We're called the European Research Group, so we'll do what it says on the tin. And I'm sure other MPs will too. And I really would plead with the government, don't try and bounce Parliament. Don't try and force us into a vote without enough information to take a proper decision. Because previous examples of when people have tried to do this generally end very badly.
VAT rules, according to what's been rumoured from this deal, VAT rules universally applied across the whole of the UK, including Northern Ireland. Red and green lanes for goods coming from the mainland straight to Northern Ireland only, no checks, and potentially any legal issues going to Stormont first rather than the ECJ, rather than Strasbourg. Chris Heaton-Harris, who was your predecessor at the ERG, I think he was there for 5 years as the chairman.
He wasn't my direct predecessor. Steve Baker was my predecessor.
Before, but he's done his stint and he's earned his Brexiteer stripes, it's fair to say. He is the Northern Ireland Secretary. He's been quoted in today's Sunday Times as saying that if the Eurosceptics had been offered this deal 3 years ago, they'd have bitten your hand off for it.
Well, I'm one Eurosceptic. I'm not sure I would have done. Again, I'm sorry to hammer the nail, but it is fundamental.
Hammer that nail.
We absolutely need to know the details. But look, with regard to the European Court of Justice and EU law, I think it's very difficult to accept any solution where EU law still runs in Northern Ireland, because it would mean that Northern Ireland is in a completely different constitutional position to England, Scotland and Wales. When we left the EU, their law no longer continued to apply in those three countries as such. And if there was a dispute, the ECJ couldn't arbitrate it, but it can still in Northern Ireland. So I don't believe the DUP will ever accept that situation, which means that if that is the basis of the deal, I think, unfortunately, it's likely to fail.
Well, in just a couple of minutes, I'll be asking Marc Francois why he is a Conservative, also how he felt on that day in which the British people voted by a majority to leave the European Union, his journey as a politician and as a public figure. I'll also be asking him whether, with some hesitation there in relation to Rishi Sunak's deal with Brussels, whether he's allowing the great to be the enemy of the good. Are the ERG falling into the trap of ideological purity? I'll be putting that to the big man next. Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. The papers still to come, but with me in a Mark Meets special is the Conservative MP and the chairman of the European Research Group of Eurosceptic MPs, Marc Francois. Mark, great to have you in the studio. Thank you for giving up a chunk of your Sunday night. What would you normally be doing on a Sunday night? Hopefully just relaxing with my wife, Olivia. You know, just even politicians deserve a day off. And freshly married, almost your 1 year anniversary in June. You mustn't forget that date, by the way. I'll try not to. I mean, that was the highlight of my year last year, was marrying Olivia. There were a few other things going on in politics. I quipped to a friend of mine over the Christmas-New Year break. Last year for me was not 4 weddings and a funeral. It was 1 wedding and 3 prime ministers. Yeah, that would have kept you busy. You have been a Eurosceptic since when? Can you pinpoint the moment politically where you thought, I'm really not having the EU? Well, look, when I came into the House of Commons in 2001, I suppose I was a Eurosceptic by inclination. I made my maiden speech against the Treaty of Nice on the basis that you may as well start as you mean to go on. But at that time, you could have put me in a kind of box that would have said remain but reform. Right. You know, try and get them to change it. The epiphany for me was the Lisbon Treaty. In 2008-9, I was working on that. William Hague was the Shadow Foreign Secretary. I was the Shadow Europe Minister. So when we debated it, that was 300 pages of dense text. When we debated it in the Commons, William did the second reading debate, and it was then left to me as the junior minister to do the detail of the treaty line by line. We spent 14 nights debating that treaty in great detail. And as we went through it, it became apparent we couldn't change so much as a punctuation mark. And we literally couldn't change any of it. And at the end of it, I said to my researcher, a great guy called Christopher Howarth, we've got to get out of this. You know, we're not running our own country. Parliament's been reduced to the status of a rubber stamp. So that, I think, for me, was the epiphany. And at that time, hardly anyone would ever have thought that, you know, we would leave the European Union. And yet 8 years later, we had a referendum and we did exactly that. Now, far be it from me, as somebody that voted Remain, to be the biggest cheerleader for Brexit. But it seems to have happened that way because I'm a Democrat, immediately accepted the result. I think it brings with it huge opportunities. But I think that this political and diplomatic standoff with Brussels is not doing the Brexit cause any favours. As I mentioned earlier in the show, in my big opinion, Mark, what I'm worried about in terms of the ERG and the DUP being ideologically pure in relation to Brexit, and I understand why, and it's about sovereignty, but it risks playing into the hands of Remainers who seek to paint a narrative of Brexit as a disaster. If we pursue the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which sees us tear up the agreement, we could have months, if not years, of trade tensions, possibly a trade war, legal fees, a completely non-compliant EU who will not engage on any other issues, including stopping the boats, and of course, just years and years of deadlock. We don't need that, and it doesn't help Brexit if we do.
The trade war is a complete red herring. It's an idle threat, because effectively that will require unanimity around the whole of the EU. And after the great leadership that we've shown on Ukraine, first by Boris, then by Rishi Sunak, I think it's incredibly unlikely that the Poles and the Baltic states, the Eastern Europeans, aren't going to stab us in the back after that. So I think the trade war is a red herring.
But endless court cases?
But no,
stalemate?
Let me try. Well, let me try and answer your question directly. Why is this so important? Why does this really matter? It's about the Good Friday Agreement. Because we're coming up to the 25th anniversary, and there was a poll at the end of January that said 35% of unionists, only 35%, would now vote for the Good Friday Agreement, let alone the protocol. And the absolute fundamental principle of the Good Friday Agreement is of consent. And the unionists are so disillusioned because of the way the protocol has been operating, there is a very real risk that the Good Friday Agreement itself could collapse. Lord Trimble, a Nobel laureate who sadly died a little while ago, said back in May 2022, John Hume and I have made great sacrifices to help bring peace to Northern Ireland, and now all of that is at risk. And that was David Trimble. So if we can't cut the Gordian knot on this, if we can't sort this out, there is a very real risk that the Good Friday Agreement itself will collapse, and we will go back to dark days in Northern Ireland that no one wants to see.
You are the chair of the influential ERG. Where will you compromise?
Well, if we're allowed, I'm sorry to say it yet again.
See the detail.
We need to see. We need to see the detail.
There are many Brexiteers watching the show and listening, and really, I'm passionate about Brexit becoming a success, and I think it will be, because I think the fundamentals are positive. We are a sovereign nation again, but many will be anxious that. In the end, what the ERG and perhaps the DUP are doing is falling into the ideological purity trap, and essentially having a dream that will never manifest itself, which is full, total sovereignty, independence from European courts. Well, what's wrong with a tweaked or improved protocol? Why does it have to go all together? Many will argue that the protocol going is for the birds.
Well, all I and my colleagues have ever really wanted is to live in a free country where we elect our own parliament, government, and we make our own laws and we live under them in peace. I wouldn't call that ideological purity. I'd just call it common sense. So we have left the EU. We legally left in 2020. We no longer got MEPs in the European Parliament because we're no longer entitled to them. But there is this element of unfinished business, and we do need to get this sorted out for the very pressing reason that I have just given you. And then
your timeline, I mean, if the ERG are strict on this, your timeline could be 10 years.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And, the Foreign Secretary has said that if the DUP don't back this deal, then neither will the government. So it's not just a matter of the ERG being, quote, purist, as you put it. So will the government, by the sound of it.
Well, I'll give you credit, which is you've held the government's feet to the fire for many years, and you've already saved us from some pretty awful agreements. So, full credit to you for that. Don't take the ideological purity as an insult. But in the end, everyone wants a deal. So here's the question. It's an easy one. What's going to happen?
Well, we need to do something about the Good Friday Agreement. We need to get that sorted out. But I think it was Theresa May who famously said no deal is better than a bad deal. And the worst possible thing to do in this situation would be to agree a really bad deal that no one's happy with, that makes the situation even worse. This is a one-off opportunity because of the deadline, because all experience dealing with the EU shows that you need some kind of compression to get them to make concessions, right? So here is a golden opportunity to get this right once and for all. And if we can expunge EU law from Northern Ireland so they run the European Union as they see fit, and if there's any disputes, they adjudicate them under their courts, and we run the United Kingdom as we see fit, and if there are any disputes, we adjudicate them under our courts, then we can hopefully all rub along nicely.
I take your point about you need to see the detail, but you're such an experienced politician, and you've absolutely immersed yourself in the world of UK-EU relations over many years. You must have a gut instinct. You must have a slight sense of what that deal is and what the implications are. What do you think are the percentage chances that you'll find it satisfactory this week?
Well, it really... even
50-50?
Well, I'm not going to put a number on it because I don't know what...
Is it already a no? Because, over a couple of whiskies and a cigar, you'd be honest with me and you'd say, Mark, I'm not having this deal.
Look, The fundamental thing is what the DUP say. Because if they say no, it doesn't fly, they don't re-enter Stormont, the executive isn't back up and running. So
Is the Prime Minister that stupid?
I don't think the Prime Minister's stupid at all. He's a very intelligent man.
But he's not going to have a deal that's a non-starter of the DUP. So that, in a sense, if we're assuming that he's got his head screwed on, the DUP will swallow this deal, at which point you're happy.
Well, as I understand it, the DUP have not signed up to this. I mean, I would hope, because they're close allies of ours, that if they were going to, I'd at least get a phone call after all this. But as far as I understand it, certainly as of this evening, you know, they have not signed up to this. And I think they're as keen to see the practical details as we are. But they have argued pretty much for the same that we have argued, which is that the only way to really restore peace to this situation properly, to get back support for the Good Friday Agreement, to get the unionists back on board, to renew that consent, which is at the heart of the Good Friday Agreement, which has underpinned peace in Northern Ireland, you know, for a quarter of a century, is to address their concerns, and their bottom line concern is to get rid of EU law, so that they are on the same footing as people who live in England or Scotland or Wales.
Clock's against us. Don't want to get in trouble with Mark, the producer. Two quick ones for you. We know that, you know, we've got the issue of the protocol. It needs to be resolved. We can all agree on that. We've had the pandemic and a massive transition, having left this bloc after over 4 decades of membership. So I've always said it's going to be a bumpy ride. I think long-term it will be a success. That's my personal view.
So do I.
And I say that as a Remainer. However, is the Brexit that we've currently got better than EU membership? Because the likes of Ben Habib, another red-blooded Brexiteer, argues that this current Brexit is actually worse than Remain.
Well, you know, Ben's got his own axe to grind, and it's a democracy, and, you know, he can make his own argument if he wants. But yes, you know, we are better off out. Just look at the vaccine rollout. We had one of the fastest rollouts in the world.
Small businesses, though, the companies that don't bother exporting to the EU anymore because of paperwork.
Well, we're signing trade deals around the world. We've signed over 70, including new ones with Australia and New Zealand that, you know, weren't already extant under the European Union. We've taken back control of our trade policy. We've effectively now got full control of our foreign policy. And look at how well Boris and now Rishi have used that in relation to the Ukraine. We run our own show. We are sovereign in our own country. What are the Ukrainians fighting for? They're fighting to be free, and we're backing them to the hilt. We now have the right to run our own country as we see fit. And I believe, like you, that we will prosper as a result. And one last quick thing. I self-published my book via Amazon, still available on Amazon, by the way. Why? Because when I went to the UK publishing industry, they were all too woke to publish it. So that brings us back to where you came in.
It most certainly does. A thrill to have you in the studio. Thank you for your candour. Good luck this week. I know it's going to be a busy one. And congratulations to you and your missus on your nuptials almost a year ago.
Thank you very much.
Lucky lady. Thank you, Mark.
Always a pleasure.